Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Knock at the Cabin. This is directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I'll admit, I haven't seen a Shyamalan movie in a hot minute, but when I look back at his career, especially in 1999, obviously he really capitalized on a moment with the success of The Sixth Sense, and then that was followed by Unbreakable. And yeah, that was his moment. That was when the media was calling him like the new Hitchcock, and he was seen, as this big suspense director. Perhaps oversold to us now that we have perspective on things, but that's okay, it happens. But eventually he hit kind of like a mid-career slump in the mid-2000s with movies like Avatar: The Last Airbender, which we won't go there, and After Earth. But it took him some time to kind of regain his footing in the suspense world, but I think he's finally here. And one thing that I like about Shyamalan overall when I look at his career, just in terms of his consistency, I think he balances kind of like this fun buzz of the suspense popcorn filmmaking with kind of like this 1950s style of like campy sci-fi horror, kind of very much McCarthy era. Or honestly, it might even remind me a little bit of like the 3D movies of the 1950s, real cheesy, and then a little bit of Spielberg as well. But there's always a camp factor for me when I look at his movies, and that is where I gain the most from him in terms of originality and just basic entertainment for myself. I'll admit, a movie that I have seen maybe way too many times as a kid was the movie Signs, and yeah, I love that movie. Is the conceit a little bit flimsy? Absolutely it is. Is the climax stupid? Absolutely it is. And yet, I don't know, I think it's hilarious. It's silly, but it's compelling. The third act completely falls apart for me, and yet, it still feels really cinematic and fun, and I enjoy the movie. And I think the film knows exactly what it is. It's that cornball entertainment, as I said, very kind of like sci-fi suspense, blatant social commentary, all done with a sense of fun, and you can tell the person who made the movie enjoys watching movies, and that's very important. There's nothing wrong with that. But here we have Knock at the Cabin, which is part of a two-picture deal that Shyamalan made with Universal Pictures, and this is the second film in that deal. And this is about a gay couple named Eric and Andrew and their little adopted daughter named Wynn, and they are on vacation in a cabin, a la Funny Games or any of those typical horror setups. Wynn is outside of the cabin and she is catching grasshoppers and putting them in a jar, and she basically says, "I'm not going to hurt you," to the grasshoppers. "I'm just going to study you for a while," which is very on the nose line, but I think it resonates quite deeply with Shyamalan just as a concept. But nevertheless, a burly man with kind of leathery skin and tattoos comes up to her, and he looks very scary, but he seems gentle. It's like a gentle giant. He asks her name, he tries to play with her, and he's never raising his voice or anything like that. He's kind to her. Well, it turns out this man is Leonard, played by DAVE Bautista, and he is here with some associates, and they are armed with these man-made weapons, and they are here to hold Gwen and her two dads hostage. And of course, they hit the dads with the bombshell that in order to save the world from the apocalypse, they must make a huge sacrifice that none of them in the family are prepared to make. And really, a lot of the tension here comes from what you choose to believe or don't believe based on the information that is given to you. And same with our main characters, the two dads and the daughter. It's about what they choose to believe or not believe, and we are given very little information beyond what they know. These intruders are basically begging them to make this choice, and they're doing it in a way that is very different than what you might expect. And they talk about their own families and their own jobs and all the things that are at stake because of this. But again, they just don't seem very malicious, and Leonard, being the leader here, he's a man who he's very much not wanting to raise his voice, and he only wants to be violent if it is absolutely necessary. And so out of this, it becomes what? It is a sort of allegory, thick with very overarching metaphors dealing with the weight of consequence. Family versus the world, sacrifice for a greater good on a very basic level. But I think more than that, it's about the slippery nature of information in the modern world and how we receive it, conspiracy theories, and lack of media trust, identity politics, individualism, the feeling of being targeted as a human being no matter who you are is, maybe clouding the reality of an impending doom. And to me, this is just kind of what it means to be a person in the modern world. And there's a lot going on here, a lot of really great concepts going on, thought-provoking concepts. And someday, I think it would be nice if Shyamalan treated them with more detail, with more nuance, not just kind of like as a quick A and B story network television script. That's how it feels when he writes. And my problem here is a lot of these concepts here dealing with the characters and the story, they just kind of hang there like a cloud of dust, and they never solidify into something that is truly workable as moving pieces in the story that really feel ingrained into the characters, into their makeup. Everything just kind of remains a little bit lofty as metaphors that you just can't sink your teeth into. You can label them and you can attach meaning to them and say a bunch of things about them, and yet they don't function as something deeper. And not to say I was bored watching the film. I was never bored. I actually really was enjoying it, but just the aromas were never coming alive for me fully. Shyamalan, again, for all his faults, I love it when he can take all of these very lofty, silly ideas and make them accessibly campy in a way that is, maintaining a sort of cinematic vision as well as the tension. And often, another good thing about him is his twists and a lot of the things that he can kind of delay later in the script. Sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't, but I do think it's a big part of what makes him compelling as a storyteller. It almost feels like the production was a little bit rushed and it feels small compared to something like Signs, which, that's a film that is about a small family, and it is also kind of an intimate setting, and yet it has such a large scope to it. The score, the cinematography, there's a lot more kind of a sense of setting, of paranoia. It just grounds you in the world a lot more, I think. And yes, this one is even more intimate. And so it functions almost like a play, and that maybe works better for this to a degree, but I do feel like at the same time, it's important for our characters to feel alienated from a world that they don't understand or, they're afraid of, the world outside of their cabin. But we also need to feel the inner worlds of our characters and really have those develop, I think, visually. So I do think that this could have used more interesting direction to breathe life into a lot of the moments that just need a little bit of pep, sparkle. But also the fact that this movie is, very kind of straight down the line. It's not shifty, it's more clean cut. For me, that kind of left something to be desired. It feels like he's not allowing these concepts to fully be tested in interesting ways, to get us to look at them in a new way. I actually thought one of the high points of this movie were the performances. The performances are really fantastic, and give it up to Bautista. I think he gives a fantastic performance, and this is maybe the best performance I think he's ever given that I have seen. And I think without him, as in the actor, not the writing, the film falls apart. The emotional depth that he creates without giving us much information centers us, I think, as an audience. And we get a backstory from all of the characters, whether it's told by flashback or whether they're explaining it to different characters in the movie. And somehow Bautista is the most enigmatic and the most intriguing. His size is one thing, and I'll admit, the whole gentle giant kind of persona or performance style that he has. I was afraid with this movie it might ring false. It might feel overtly sentimental, especially, in an M. Night Shyamalan film. But no, he so proved me wrong in this movie. His eyes are just full of pain and sadness. I found myself kind of filling in the blanks in my mind of who this character is and what he's gone through by far more than any of the other characters. And I ended up wanting him to have the satisfying conclusion, even though he is the antagonist, just because of how many emotional strings he's able to tie together on his own, and none of it is written on the page. And that's, a great performance. Groff and Aldrich, I think, chose to play it more kind of neutral, but I think they did a really good job on that. Very solid performances. And the actress who played Adrian, she has kind of a frazzled quality, almost kind of mousy, and yet she also makes you believe in her. And the Sabrina part, I feel like if this movie had been made in 2006, 2007, that part would have been played by Viola Davis before she got big, and they'd be right to cast her, I think. But the actress that they have here, I've seen her in stuff, but she just has an amazing face, something that is very unique. I'd love to photograph her or draw her or something, but just incredibly expressive for the cinema. I will say though, the one performance that was working for me the least was actually Rupert Grint, and not to knock him because he's a good actor, and it wasn't like he was doing a bad job in the film. As an actor, I always associate him more with kind of light comedic timing, more that kind of British style of charm. His character comes in at the beginning and he really needs to make a statement, I think. He's kind of setting us on this very unsettling journey of mistrust and brutality. And so there has to be this edge to him. I wanted something disturbed and weird where I'm kind of like, oh man, what the hell is going on? Who are these people? A less straightforward performance to kind of throw us off from the monotony. They could cast somebody like Caleb Landry Jones. What's that guy doing? Call him. Just so far as he doesn't lean too much, I think, into that typecasting of the weirdo that he always plays, but he can play properly unhinged. He has the perfect energy for it. But again, the actors really do elevate the material as much as they can, and it's kind of hard to do, I think, at times with somebody like Shyamalan because he does get overly preachy, with his metaphors, and he feels like a lot of his scripts are talking at us rather than with us, so it feels a little bit condescending. And I admit, here, as it started to get preachy towards the end, I kind of checked out a little bit. Some of the ideas, the attempts at humor, I don't think they land always because I don't know if Shyamalan has a full understanding of their function on a higher level, and so we don't feel them. And as usual, there are many plot holes in this movie, but I tend to get beyond that because I'm a big suspension of disbelief kind of girl when it comes to movies, because dreams aren't reality, so why should movies have to be? But there is kind of a sense of like slapped together or laziness here where, you know, it's like he's not wanting to go the extra mile. I know he said that when he wrote the script, it was one of the fastest he ever wrote, and it does kind of show in some areas. But I don't want to knock it too hard, pun. But no, really, I did enjoy the movie. I think it's worth your time for sure. I don't see it holding up. I don't see it as something that you're going to want to return to for like multiple viewings, mainly due to just kind of the straightforward nature of it and just kind of the inability to connect all of the ideas fully. But I do think it's worth your time. So I am going to recommend it. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.